The police precinct was alive with the hum of a busy morning. Officers moved between desks, coffee cups in hand, exchanging banter and discussing the day ahead. Among them was Officer Bradshaw, a middle-aged cop known for his brash attitude and unchecked arrogance. For years, his behavior had gone unquestioned, and his reputation for making demeaning remarks about civilians, especially minorities, was well known but rarely addressed. The precinct door swung open, and a black woman stepped inside. She carried herself with an air of confidence, her tailored leather jacket and polished boots setting her apart from the usual crowd. Her presence was commanding but understated, immediately drawing attention from the officers scattered around the room. Some paused mid-conversation to glance her way, while others dismissed her with fleeting curiosity. She scanned the room quietly, observing the environment with calm composure, as though sizing up her surroundings. Before she could speak, Bradshaw locked eyes with her. He leaned back in his chair, his coffee steaming in hand, and muttered to a nearby officer loud enough for her to hear, "Looks like someone wandered into the wrong place. Bet she's here to complain about parking tickets." A few officers chuckled nervously, unsure how to respond. The woman didn't react. Instead, she stepped further into the precinct, her heels clicking purposefully against the tiled floor. Her lack of response seemed to irritate Bradshaw, who took her silence as a challenge. "Hey!" he called out, his tone sharper. "Can I help you, or are you just here to waste everyone's time?" The woman finally turned to face him, her expression calm but resolute. "I'm here on official business," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the din of the room. Bradshaw scoffed, his arrogance flaring. "Official business? Dressed like that? Who do you think you are, strolling in here like you own the place?" Before she could respond, Bradshaw stood, his coffee cup in hand. He approached her with deliberate steps, his smirk widening as he took in her appearance. "Let me guess," he sneered. "Lost? Looking for your boyfriend? Or maybe you're here to make a complaint about how unfair the world is." The room fell silent. Officers who had been laughing moments earlier now exchanged uneasy glances. Bradshaw's tone had crossed a line, but no one dared to intervene. The woman's calm demeanor remained unshaken as she held his gaze. When her composure didn't falter, Bradshaw's irritation grew. In an impulsive show of dominance, he lifted his coffee cup and pretended to offer it to her, then intentionally tilted it forward, spilling the hot liquid onto her jacket. The room collectively gasped, the audacity of his actions stunning even those who had initially found his remarks amusing. The woman looked down briefly at her stained jacket, then back at Bradshaw, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the room stood still. Unbeknownst to Bradshaw, this was no ordinary visitor. Within moments, the precinct would learn the truth. The woman standing before them wasn't just any civilian. She was their new police chief, here to assess the very officers she would now command. The new police chief, Angela Daniels, had spent her life navigating spaces where she was often underestimated. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she had seen firsthand how systemic injustices affected communities like hers. Instead of succumbing to bitterness, Angela turned those experiences into fuel, committing herself to becoming an agent of change. Her academic journey was marked by excellence. She graduated at the top of her class from a prestigious law enforcement academy, earning accolades for her sharp intellect and ability to lead. Early in her career, Angela made a name for herself by cracking complex cases and addressing issues of corruption within her department. Her fearless approach to justice and reform earned her both admiration and animosity. Angela wasn't just a trailblazer in her field. She was also a black woman challenging the status quo in an institution resistant to change. When she was appointed police chief in her previous city, Angela inherited a department riddled with inefficiencies and entrenched biases. Through unrelenting effort, she turned it around, introducing comprehensive training programs on de-escalation, implicit bias, and community engagement. Crime rates dropped, and public trust in the department rose significantly. Her successes didn't go unnoticed. She was soon tapped to lead reforms in another precinct plagued by complaints of officer misconduct and systemic discrimination. Angela's new role brought her to a precinct with a reputation for harboring officers resistant to accountability. For years, residents had voiced concerns about unchecked behavior, especially regarding racial profiling and unprofessional conduct. Her mission was clear: transform the culture, hold officers accountable, and rebuild trust between the department and the community. But Angela knew change wouldn't come easily. Many within the precinct viewed her appointment as a threat to their comfortable status quo, and she was prepared to face resistance head-on. Meanwhile, Officer Bradshaw, a mid-level cop with over a decade on the force, had built a reputation of his own, though for vastly different reasons. Bradshaw wasn't known for his dedication to justice or community service. Instead, his record was littered with complaints ranging from verbal harassment to questionable use of authority. His colleagues knew him as a loud, opinionated presence in the precinct, someone who prided himself on being old school in his methods and unapologetically abrasive. Bradshaw's behavior had long been the subject of internal reviews, but nothing ever came of the complaints. Some officers avoided working with him, while others quietly tolerated his antics to keep the peace. Bradshaw's confidence in his untouchable status only grew over time. Senior colleagues, many of whom shared his dismissive attitude toward accountability, often swept allegations under the rug. Any reprimands he received were superficial, a slap on the wrist that left him emboldened. Bradshaw's disdain wasn't limited to civilians. He was openly hostile toward female officers, especially those who climbed the ranks. In his eyes, women didn't belong in positions of authority, and he didn't shy away from expressing those views in hushed conversations around the precinct. The news of a new police chief, a black woman no less, had sent Bradshaw into a quiet fury. He saw her appointment as an affront to everything he believed about the chain of command. Angela, on the other hand, was fully aware of the dynamics she was stepping into. She had read the reports, reviewed the complaints, and even quietly spoken to a few officers before officially taking her position. She understood that Bradshaw represented a broader culture within the precinct, one that thrived on complacency and resistance to accountability. For Angela, confronting individuals like Bradshaw wasn't just an inevitability. It was a necessary step in dismantling the systemic problems she had been brought in to address. Despite her high-profile reputation, Angela believed in leading by example and letting her actions speak louder than her titles. When she decided to make an unannounced visit to the precinct before formally introducing herself, it wasn't to intimidate or exert power. It was to observe. She wanted to see how the officers operated without the filter of knowing she was their new chief. What she witnessed during her visit would not only confirm the challenges ahead but also set the stage for one of the most pivotal moments in her career. Bradshaw's interaction with Angela wasn't just an example of individual misconduct. It was a snapshot of the broader culture she was determined to change. His arrogance, fueled by years of unchecked behavior, led him to make a critical error. assuming Angela's quiet presence meant she lacked authority. What he didn't realize was that the very woman he was mocking had the power to transform the department and his career forever. Bradshaw, feeling emboldened by his reputation as the precinct's resident bully, sneered at the woman standing calmly before him. Her confidence and composed demeanor irritated him even more, and in a moment of unrestrained arrogance, he reached for a steaming cup of coffee sitting on the desk. With an exaggerated motion, he poured the scalding liquid over her head, laughing as the hot liquid splashed down her face and onto her leather jacket. The other officers froze. The room, which moments ago had been bustling with chatter and activity, fell silent as the coffee hit her skin. A few officers, visibly appalled, exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to intervene. Others, less shocked but equally wary, let out nervous chuckles, more out of discomfort than agreement. Bradshaw, mistaking the silence for approval, doubled down. "Maybe, next time, you'll think twice before walking in here like you own the place," he said smugly, his voice dripping with condescension. The woman, her face now dripping with coffee, did something that no one in the precinct expected. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement or submission, but one of quiet authority and unshakable confidence. Slowly, she reached for a napkin on the desk and wiped her face with deliberate precision. The tension in the room was palpable as every eye remained fixed on her, waiting for her next move. She adjusted her jacket, now stained with coffee, and fixed Bradshaw with an unwavering gaze. "Do you always treat your superior officers this way?" she asked, her voice calm and measured, as if she were discussing the weather. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Officers who had been standing idly suddenly straightened, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm. Bradshaw, however, looked unfazed. He blinked, then let out a bark of laughter, assuming this was some kind of joke. "Superior officer?" he scoffed, crossing his arms. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my precinct. People like you don't—" "Enough," she interrupted, her voice firm but not raised. Her calm demeanor cut through his arrogance like a knife. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an ID badge, holding it up for everyone to see. The shield gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Angela Daniels, Chief of Police. As of this morning, the room erupted into chaos. Gasps echoed across the precinct as officers scrambled to process what had just happened. A few whispered to one another in disbelief, while others stood frozen, staring at her badge as if it were a grenade. Bradshaw's smug grin faltered, replaced by a look of confusion, then dread. "Chief?" he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "You can't be serious. You're black? A woman? Wearing a leather jacket instead of a suit?" She finished for him, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I'm aware. But none of that changes the fact that I'm your superior, Officer Bradshaw. And as of right now, you're on very thin ice." Bradshaw's face turned red, his earlier bravado now replaced by a mixture of anger and fear. "I didn't know," he began, but she held up a hand to silence him. "Whether you knew or not is irrelevant," she said, her tone sharp. "What matters is that you felt entitled to humiliate and assault someone you assumed had no authority. That speaks volumes about your character and this precinct's culture." At that moment, the double doors to the precinct swung open, and a group of sharply dressed individuals entered. It was her executive team along with representatives from city leadership. They had arrived to officially introduce her as the new police chief, but were now greeted with the aftermath of Bradshaw's reckless actions. Angela turned to the team and gestured toward Bradshaw. Officer Bradshaw here just provided an excellent example of why this department is in desperate need of reform, she said, her voice carrying authority and composure. One of the officials stepped forward, clearly unimpressed with the scene. "Officer Bradshaw, you're relieved of duty pending an internal review," the official announced, much to the officer's visible dismay. The room remained tense as Angela looked around, addressing the stunned officers. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here," she said. "The days of unaccountable behavior and unchecked prejudice in this precinct are over. Effective immediately, we are raising the standard, not just for how you treat your colleagues, but for how you serve this community." As her words echoed through the room, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Bradshaw, now escorted out of the precinct, could barely meet anyone's gaze. The officers left behind looked at Angela with a mixture of respect, awe, and trepidation. Her composure had not only dismantled Bradshaw's arrogance, but had also sent a clear message. Change had arrived, and it was long overdue. Angela Daniels calmly reached into her pocket, pulling out her gleaming badge, and held it up for all to see. The room seemed to freeze in time as she spoke, her voice steady and authoritative. "Angela Daniels, your new police chief. I was appointed to lead this precinct as of this morning. My mission? To clean up this department and ensure accountability at every level." The smirk on Officer Bradshaw's face disappeared in an instant, replaced by a look of pure panic. His arrogance drained away as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. His earlier confidence that he could humiliate this woman without consequence now seemed absurd. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Some officers stepped back, distancing themselves from Bradshaw, their discomfort and unease palpable. Others stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock and realization. The gravity of the situation became clear to everyone present. This wasn't just a routine morning. It was the beginning of a seismic shift in the precinct's culture. Angela turned her gaze toward Bradshaw, her eyes piercing. "Officer Bradshaw," she said sharply, "your behavior this morning is not only unprofessional, but also a clear violation of the standards this department claims to uphold. Consider yourself relieved of duty pending an internal review." Bradshaw stammered, his bravado shattered. "Chief, You didn't think," she interrupted, her tone cutting through his excuses. "That much is obvious. But this isn't just about you, Officer Bradshaw. Your actions are symptomatic of a deeper problem within this precinct, a culture that allows misconduct and disrespect to thrive unchecked. That ends now." Angela glanced at one of the senior officers standing nearby, who looked visibly uncomfortable. "Escort Officer Bradshaw to the captain's office immediately for a disciplinary hearing," she ordered. The senior officer nodded hesitantly and stepped forward to comply. As Bradshaw was led away, Angela turned her attention to the remaining officers. She straightened her jacket, her commanding presence filling the room. "Listen carefully," she began, her voice firm but measured. "What happened here today is not just about one individual's behavior. It's about the environment that allowed it to happen. From this moment forward, things will be different. Professionalism, accountability, and respect are no longer optional. They are mandatory." Her words carried weight, and the officers stood in stunned silence. Many began to realize that their days of turning a blind eye to misconduct were over. Angela's presence and authority were undeniable, and her message was clear. The precinct was no longer a safe haven for arrogance and abuse of power. In the moments that followed, whispers filled the room as officers exchanged glances, trying to process what had just unfolded. Angela, unfazed, turned and walked toward the captain's office. The message had been delivered, and the first steps toward transforming the precinct were already underway. Bradshaw's career was in jeopardy, and the rest of the department now faced the reality of a leader who would tolerate nothing less than excellence and integrity. Angela Daniels wasted no time in addressing the fallout from Officer Bradshaw's actions. Within hours of the incident, she had initiated a formal investigation, ensuring the process was transparent and swift. Bradshaw's behavior, captured on surveillance cameras and witnessed by numerous officers, left no room for ambiguity. By the end of the week, he was officially terminated for gross misconduct. The news of his dismissal sent a clear and powerful message throughout the precinct. Unprofessional and discriminatory behavior would no longer be tolerated. Angela made it her mission to ensure that this incident would not be a singular punishment, but a catalyst for systemic change. The chief immediately launched a comprehensive overhaul of the department's policies and training. Mandatory workshops on racial sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and professional conduct were implemented for all officers, regardless of rank. Angela brought in respected community leaders and experienced trainers to lead these sessions, emphasizing the importance of mutual respect between law enforcement and the communities they served. Angela's approach wasn't just about rules and training. She actively engaged with her team. She held open forums, encouraging officers to voice their concerns and share their perspectives on how to improve the precinct's culture. Her willingness to listen, combined with her decisive actions, began to shift the atmosphere in the station. Officers who had initially been skeptical of her leadership started to see her as a strong and capable chief who wasn't there to micromanage but to elevate the department to a higher standard. Meanwhile, Angela set up a mentorship program for younger officers, pairing them with seasoned professionals who embodied the principles of respect and integrity. She also created an anonymous reporting system, ensuring that anyone could safely bring attention to misconduct without fear of retaliation. Slowly but surely, trust began to build within the precinct. Officers who had once laughed nervously during Bradshaw's outburst now felt a sense of relief that such behavior was being rooted out. They started to view Angela not as an outsider, but as a leader who demanded the best from everyone while giving her all in return. Her ability to command authority while remaining approachable and fair earned her genuine respect among the team. Angela didn't stop at internal reform. She reached out to the local community, organizing events to strengthen ties between residents and the police. These events not only showcased the precinct's commitment to change, but also allowed officers and civilians to connect on a personal level, breaking down barriers of mistrust. In a matter of weeks, the precinct began to feel like a different place. Officers worked with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their actions were being held to a higher standard. Angela's leadership had proven that accountability was not just about consequences, but also about creating an environment where everyone could thrive with integrity. By addressing the root causes of misconduct and fostering a culture of respect and professionalism, Angela turned a moment of humiliation into a turning point for the entire department. Her unwavering dedication to reform earned her the admiration of her team, her community, and even the broader law enforcement community. Through her actions, Angela showed that true leadership is about creating lasting change, even in the face of adversity. Angela Daniels had transformed a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson in leadership. Walking through the precinct months after the coffee-throwing incident, she was no longer met with skepticism or guarded glances. Instead, officers greeted her warmly, their nods and smiles reflecting a newfound respect for the police chief, who had not only demanded accountability, but also inspired change. The culture within the precinct had shifted significantly. Officers, once hesitant to challenge unprofessional behavior, now upheld a higher standard of conduct. Angela's reforms had created an environment where respect, fairness, and integrity weren't just buzzwords, but core principles woven into the department's fabric. Officers felt empowered to do their best, knowing that their leader held everyone, including herself, to the same standard. Meanwhile, the disgraced officer who had sparked the change was a distant memory to most, but his story served as a cautionary tale. Bradshaw was seen packing his belongings, the weight of his dismissal evident in his slouched posture. His arrogance had cost him not only his career but also his reputation. As he left the precinct for the last time, Angela's message was clear. Actions had consequences, and no one was above accountability. Angela's impact extended far beyond the walls of the precinct. At a large community event held to commemorate the precinct's transformation, she stood at the podium, her presence commanding but approachable. Officers and civilians alike gathered to hear her speak, united by a shared hope for a better future. Her speech was both reflective and forward-looking. This department has faced challenges and change is never easy, she began, her voice steady. But true leadership starts with respect for the badge we wear and the people we serve. It's not about power or control. It's about building trust and ensuring justice for everyone, no matter their background. The crowd erupted in applause, moved by her words and the changes they had already seen under her leadership. Angela spoke of the importance of community police relations and outlined her vision for continued reform, emphasizing collaboration between law enforcement and the people they served. Her ability to connect with both groups was a testament to her authenticity and dedication. As the event concluded, Angela stepped off the stage, greeted by officers and community members who wanted to thank her personally. A young recruit approached her hesitantly, expressing how her leadership had inspired him to join the force with a renewed sense of purpose. Angela smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Always remember why you wear that badge," she said. "It's to protect and uplift, not to intimidate." In the final scene, Angela stood alongside her team, her gaze steady and filled with quiet determination. The precinct she now led was far from perfect, but it was on a path of continuous improvement. Angela knew there was still work to be done, but she also understood the power of persistence and resilience. Her leadership had shown that even the most entrenched systems could change when driven by courage and a commitment to justice. Her closing words at the event echoed in the minds of everyone present. Respect isn't optional. It's the foundation of everything we stand for. And with that, Angela Daniels became a symbol of hope, proving that true leadership could overcome even the deepest divisions.